despite these advances that you mentioned that the Russian troops have made in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, they've not been so significant that they made a major difference. But still, Ukraine has managed to maintain amazing defensive posture, and they have kept the Russians out despite these slight advancements. So I don't think Putin has got such leverage now and feels that he can just plough on to victory. I think victory is so far ahead that it could be years and years away and probably never happen at all. So it's not all going Putin's way, but nevertheless, I think you're right. I think he feels at the moment, especially with winter approaching, that the Russian troops will make sufficient advances to make him think, why go for a peace settlement when I'm doing pretty well?
And today I'm joined by the former Times defence editor, Mike Evans. Hello, Mike.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us. Let's start with Ukraine, Mike, because there's a lot going on there. Donald Trump's overseas envoy, Steve Witkoff, is going to go back to Moscow this week for talks with Vladimir Putin on ending the war with Ukraine. Last week, of course, the US drew up a peace plan with Russia. Then they held talks with Ukraine and drew up a rather different plan with Ukraine. Is there any prospect, you think, Mike, of Vladimir Putin approving the plan drawn up by the US and the Ukrainians?
I sometimes think that the sort of parallel universes going on here. On one side, you've got Ukraine and Europe. On the other side, you've got Russia. In the middle, you've got America sort of desperately hopping from one side to the other, trying to produce a formula that would be satisfactory to both these sides. I really wonder whether this is possible. I think Steve Witkoff and also Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, will be in Moscow today. They land today, and they will produce this sort of new version of the original 28-point plan that Trump produced. Basically, it's in the hands of Vladimir Putin. He hasn't shown any interest so far in any formula that does not meet the demands that he has made. And the 28-point formula that was produced originally, seems like weeks ago, but actually was not that long ago, really was so pro-Russia that, of course, he said it produced grounds for some sort of possible peace settlement. But since then, it's changed completely, and it's got a lot of Ukrainian, quite rightfully, a lot of Ukrainian demands. And so, no, I don't think Putin will accept it. However, Putin is a canny fellow, and he is playing Trump pretty well. And I think he will show sufficient interest to make sure that Steve Witkoff returns to the White House to speak to Trump with some encouraging signs. But in reality, I don't think there's any possibility of Putin saying, I'll go along with these plans. Anything that Ukraine wants is fine by me.
Well, exactly.
He's not going to say that.
I mean, one can understand the logic of having, one side's plan and the other side's plan and seeking to broker a compromise between the two. But that vital last bit of brokering the compromise between the two doesn't really seem to be happening. Russia is said to be making some progress on the battlefield in Ukraine in recent weeks. One might think that perhaps at the moment they're sort of in less mind to compromise than they even have been for quite a while.
I would agree with that. Trump, some time ago, you may remember, said that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, didn't have any cards in his hand. That's not actually strictly true. He does have cards. He has the Europeans on his side. He has America on his side still. And also, despite these advances that you mentioned that the Russian troops have made in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine, they've not been so significant that they made a major difference. But still, Ukraine has managed to maintain amazing defensive posture, and they have kept the Russians out despite these slight advancements. So I don't think Putin has got such leverage now and feels that he can just plough on to victory. I think victory is so far ahead that it could be years and years away and probably never happen at all. So it's not all going Putin's way, but nevertheless, I think you're right. I think he feels at the moment, especially with winter approaching, that the Russian troops will make sufficient advances to make him think, why go for a peace settlement when I'm doing pretty well?
Before we move on this, Michael, what are Ukraine's red lines? I'm not talking about sort of territorial concessions, because I appreciate that's all a bit up in the air, contentious as it is. But what guarantees does Kyiv need from the West from Europe, from America, in order to safeguard a future peace? And is there any chance of Russia being persuaded to accept those as well?
More than anything, Ukraine, Zelensky, obviously in particular, wants some sort of security guarantee. I think he probably accepts that Ukraine is not going to be invited into NATO in the next year or so. I think that's out of the question. But on the other hand, they do want some security guarantees. And I think Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, was fairly positive about that in his comments yesterday, in which he implied that this was a key part of Ukraine's future, which was to have a security guarantee so that there could no longer be any threat of an invasion from any other country in the future, from Russia, obviously. So I think that is his red line. He wants to be sure that if he signs a peace deal, even if it means conceding some territory to Russia, he wants to have a Ukraine that will be safe and prosperous in the future and will not once again face aggression from Russia.
Yeah. Look, let's turn, while I've got you, to Venezuela, because while Donald Trump's trying to end one war, some American politicians fear he's in the process of starting another one, his dispute with Venezuela. Over the weekend on Truth Social, he posted saying that Venezuelan airspace should be considered closed. This comes following months of American strikes against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean Sea and a U.S. military build-up in the region, which Venezuela says this is an extravagant, illegal and unjustified aggression. Mike, look, America has sort of dabbled in South America and Central America, obviously, quite a lot over recent decades. Have you ever seen anything quite like this?
No, they have dabbled over the years, but this is a mighty armada that he's produced in the Caribbean Sea, including this aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford. It seems extraordinary that he's built up this sort of military posture. There are about 15,000 troops in the region, 11 warships and dozens of fighter aircraft. Are they there just to knock out a few drug boats? Well, clearly not. Trump has said that he thinks he's made up his mind what he's going to do. I think that probably means that we are, within the next week or so, we're going to see some action which will involve land attacks. I don't see really any other option. I think he is considering that sort of action, and I think we're going to see it quite soon.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Michael Evans, the former Times Defence editor there, telling us about Venezuela and Ukraine.